Hun adjusted his ceremonial robes as he floated through the grand chamber of the Galactic Council station. The station orbited in neutral space, far from any single world's influence. It was here that 300 species gathered to decide the fate of civilizations. Today, they would vote on humanity. Hun had spent 30 years studying these strange creatures called humans. They came from a blue world they named Earth, tucked away in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. When they first achieved faster-than-light travel, the Council had been surprised. Most species took thousands of years to reach the stars. Humans did it in mere centuries. But Hun knew the truth. They had gotten lucky. They stumbled upon ancient ruins on their moon and reverse-engineered the technology. Without that accident, they would still be crawling on their single planet. The chamber doors opened with a soft hum. Ambassador Park entered first. She was a small woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled back neatly. Her face showed no emotion as she walked to the speaker's platform. Behind her came Captain, a military observer. He wore a crisp uniform and said nothing, his eyes scanning the chamber constantly. Hun felt a flutter of amusement. Humans always brought military personnel to diplomatic meetings, so primitive, so predictable. High Chancellor and called the session to order. His voice echoed through the chamber in 17 different languages simultaneously. We gather to consider humanity's petition for full membership in the Galactic Council. Ambassador stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Honored members of the Council, she began, humanity thanks you for this opportunity. We come in peace, seeking only to learn from the great civilizations gathered here. Hun made a note on his data pad. Classic human approach, humble, almost submissive. They knew they were outmatched in every way. No psionic powers, no natural armor, no extended, just soft, fragile creatures who barely lived 100 years. The debate began. Council members from various species raised concerns. The representative, Hun's own superior, questioned human emotional stability. They feel things too strongly, she said. They cry, they rage, they fall in love with irrational intensity. How can such beings make logical decisions? Answered each concern patiently. Yes, humans felt emotions, but they also had reason. Yes, they were short, but they accomplished much in their brief time. Yes, they had a violent history, but they had been at peace for nearly 2 generations now. Hun watched her carefully. She was good at this, he admitted. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration. She absorbed criticism like water and responded with facts. It was almost admirable. But it changed nothing. When it came time for questions, Hun activated his speaking crystal. Ambassador Park, I have studied your species extensively. Your history shows over 10,000 wars. You have nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times. What assurance can you give that you won't bring this violence to the galaxy? Met his eyes without flinching. Counselor Hun, you are correct. We have a violent past, but that past taught us the cost of war. Every human child learns about the great wars, the nuclear age, the centuries of suffering. We carry those lessons with us. We choose peace not because we don't understand war, but because we understand it too well. It was a rehearsed answer. Hun had heard it before in his research. He made another note and sat back, satisfied. The vote came hours later. The Council agreed to grant humanity provisional member status. They could trade, they could travel, they could participate in cultural exchanges. But their military would be restricted. No weapons above Class 3. No fleets larger than 50 ships. No offensive operations without Council approval. Bowed deeply when the decision was announced. Humanity accepts with gratitude, she said. As the session ended, Hun observed the human delegation preparing to leave, spoke quietly with her aides. Captain stood apart, still watching, still silent. Hun noticed something then. The captain's eyes held no gratitude, no joy at their acceptance, just a cold, calculating awareness. Hun dismissed it. Military types were always paranoid. That evening, Hun returned to his quarters and opened his personal journal. He had been documenting humanity's journey toward membership for years. This would be the final entry. Today the Council granted humanity provisional membership, he wrote. It was the right decision, though I almost feel we are being too generous. These creatures have potential, certainly, but they are so limited by their biology and psychology. They feel too much. They rush too fast. They burn bright and die young. Ambassador Park performed adequately, though I could see the effort it took for her to remain calm. These humans pride themselves on their self-control, but it is like watching someone hold their breath underwater. Eventually, they must surface and gasp for air. Eventually, their emotions overwhelm them. They call themselves survivors. They point to their violent history as proof of their resilience. But they don't understand. Survival on a single planet against their own kind is nothing compared to the complexities of galactic civilization. There are species here that have existed for millions of years, empires that span thousands of worlds, conflicts that make human wars look like children fighting in a sandbox. I give them perhaps 2 centuries before they retreat back to their own space, humbled and wiser. Or perhaps they will integrate fully, becoming a minor species that contributes in small ways. Either outcome is acceptable. What I find most charming about them is their innocence. They truly believe they have something unique to offer. They speak of their human spirit and their never-give-up attitude as if these are qualities other species lack. They don't realize that every species feels they are special. Every civilization thinks their story is unique. But the galaxy has seen it all before. The aggressive warriors who learn humility. The proud empires that crumble. The young species that discover they are not the heroes of the story, merely another chapter in a very long book. Humanity will learn, they will grow, they will fit in eventually. Or they will fade away, like so many others before them. Hun closed the journal and gazed out at the stars. In the distance, he could see Earth's sun, just another point of light among trillions. He felt satisfied with his analysis. 30 years of study had not been wasted. He understood humans completely. Or so he believed. 3 months passed peacefully. Hun almost forgot about humanity as he dealt with trade disputes and border negotiations between older, more established species. Humans were quiet, following every rule, causing no problems. Then the emergency alarm sounded. Hun arrived at the council chamber to find it already filled with agitated representatives. High Chancellor and stood at the center, his expression grave. The swarm has attacked the human colony World 4. A cold silence fell over the chamber. They were known to every species in the galaxy. They were creatures driven by an endless hunger. When they found a world, they consumed it completely. Every plant, every animal, every resource. They left nothing but bare rock behind. The council had fought the before. The results were always the same. Once the swarm established a foothold on a world, that world was lost. The only option was to evacuate if you could, and hope they moved on after feeding. Ambassador stood at the human platform, and for the first time since Hun had known her, she looked shaken. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the display screen. Images appeared, massive insect creatures tearing through buildings, swarms of them darkening the sky, human colonists fleeing in terror. 4 is a farming world, said, her voice tight. 50,000 people live there, families, children. They have no military defenses beyond basic security forces. We are requesting immediate council assistance. The debate began immediately. Hun listened as species after species voiced their opinions. The consensus was clear: strategic withdrawal, evacuate who you can, abandon the world. We cannot risk our fleets against one representative argued. They are too dangerous. Humanity must learn this lesson, another said. Some fights cannot be won. His composure cracked. You're telling us to abandon 50,000 people, to leave them to be eaten alive. N's voice was gentle but firm. Ambassador Park, we understand this is difficult, but they cannot be stopped once they establish a hive. Every species here has lost worlds to them. It is the way of things. The way of things, repeated, her voice rising. These are people, living, breathing people, mothers and fathers and children. We understand, Hun interrupted, surprising himself. He felt genuine pity for her. But emotion cannot change reality. They have consumed worlds for millions of years. We have learned to accept our losses and survive. Stared at him, and in her eyes Hun saw something he couldn't quite identify. Not anger, not desperation, something colder. Captain, who had been silent as always, stepped forward. He had been standing against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Now he moved to stand beside. Then we handle it ourselves, he said quietly. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Handle it themselves. With what? Humanity's military was restricted, 50 ships maximum, primitive weapons, no experience against anything like the Captain, and said carefully, we appreciate your courage, but you don't understand what you're facing. They are not like anything in your experience. Maybe, replied, his face showed no emotion. But those are our people down there. We don't leave our people behind. The vote came quickly. The council would not intervene. It was decided. 4 was written off as an acceptable loss for a provisional member species. Left the chamber without another word. Followed. Hun watched them go, feeling a strange unease. He had seen grief before in many species. He had seen anger, but the look in his eyes was neither. It was something else entirely. Within hours, humanity mobilized its fleet, every available ship, medical vessels, cargo haulers, and their limited warships. They moved toward 4 at maximum speed. Hun requested permission from the council to observe. For the historical record, he explained, and agreed. Let the humans have their witness. Let them have someone to document their brave, futile gesture. Hun boarded the human flagship called the Indomitable. It was a modest vessel by council standards, nothing like the grand dreadnoughts of older species. The crew was young, most barely past their training. They moved with nervous energy, checking weapons, reviewing battle plans. Met him at the airlock. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. Thank you for coming, counselor. I felt it was important to document this, Hun replied carefully. I am sorry for what you're about to face. She nodded once and walked away. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Hun observed the humans closely. They didn't act like a species facing certain defeat. They trained constantly. They checked their weapons again and again. They spoke to each other in quiet voices, sharing stories of people on 4, a daughter turning 6, a son graduating from university, a couple celebrating their anniversary. They were making it personal, Hun realized. They were turning abstract numbers into individual faces. It was going to make their failure even more painful. On the 3rd day, they arrived. 4 appeared on the main screen, and Hun felt his breath catch. 40% of the planet's surface was already gray and dead. Black masses have covered the ground like a living carpet. Their ships filled the orbital space, thousands of them, organic and grotesque. The human fleet looked like toys in comparison. Status report, commanded from the captain's chair. He had taken direct command of the flagship. 50,000 colonists confirmed alive, dug into underground shelters, an officer reported. Are breaking through. They have maybe 12 hours before total breach. Defensive fleet strength, asked. 18,000 bioships in orbit. Ground forces estimated at 40 million individual units. The numbers were absurd, impossible. Hun waited for to order retreat, to try to evacuate who they could. It was the only logical choice. Instead stood up. He looked at his crew, young faces, frightened faces, determined faces. We have 12 hours to save 50,000 people, he said clearly. The council says it can't be done. The galaxy says we should run. The think we're prey. He paused and his voice hardened. They're all wrong. We don't run. We don't abandon our people. We fight. We fight until every single colonist is safe or until there's no one left to fight. No retreat. No surrender. No mercy. The crew responded as one. No mercy. Hun felt a chill run through him. There was something in their voices, something primal and ancient. All ships commanded, engage. The human fleet surged forward, and the battle began. Hun gripped his chair as the Indomitable shook with weapons fire. He had witnessed battles before, observed many species at war, but this was different. Humans didn't fight like the Council species. They didn't maintain careful formations or follow established combat doctrine. They fought like animals backed into a corner, desperate, ferocious, unrelenting. And as the battle raged, Hun began to realize something that terrified him. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to make the regret ever touching their world. And they were succeeding. The first hour of battle shattered everything Hun thought he knew about warfare. Commander Sung stood at the tactical station, calling out orders in rapid succession. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and scars on her hands. Hun had learned she came from a military family, 5 generations of soldiers. Now he understood what that meant. Target their bioships with kinetic rounds, commanded. Full velocity, don't slow down. Hun's translator struggled with the term kinetic rounds. When the meaning became clear, he felt his stomach turn. They were using solid metal projectiles accelerated to near-light speed. The weapons were crude, simple, and devastating. When they hit a ship, the vessel simply exploded into organic matter. Commander, Hun spoke up, trying to keep his voice steady. Those weapons are classified as unnecessarily cruel by the Council. The kinetic impact causes. I know what it causes, cut him off without looking away from her screens. Counselor, with respect, we didn't ask for your rules when you left us to die. We're not following them now. A proximity alarm blared. 3 ships were closing fast on their position. Instead of pulling back, ordered, move forward, ram position. Commander, her second officer questioned. You heard me, ram them. The Indomitable surged forward. Its reinforced hull smashed into the first ship, tearing through its organic armor. The impact threw Hun against his restraints. Warning lights flashed across every console. The human ship had taken damage, but the vessel was destroyed. Hull breach on decks 5 and 6, an officer reported. Seal it and keep moving, replied. Weapons Officer Minu, status on the viral payload. Lieutenant Minu looked up from his station. He was young, perhaps 25 in human years, but his eyes were cold and focused. Ready to deploy, Commander. Dr. Han confirmed the virus is calibrated for biology. Hun stood up, ignoring his safety restraints. Wait, did you say virus? You developed a biological weapon. Dr. Borahan spent 4 hours studying the samples from the planet's surface, Minu explained casually. She identified 3 vulnerabilities in their immune system. The virus targets their neural clusters. They'll die in about 6 minutes, painful from what she says. But that's, Hun struggled to find words. The Council has spent centuries trying to find weaknesses. How did one human scientist? Because she didn't try to study them, interrupted. She tried to kill them, different approach. Deploy the virus, Minu. Missiles launched from the human ships, carrying the biological weapon. They detonated in the upper atmosphere, spreading invisible death across the forces on the ground. Through the Hun watched as millions began to convulse and fall. It's working, Minu reported with satisfaction. Ground forces are experiencing 92% casualties. Hun felt sick. Not because they were dying, they were monsters, but because of how efficiently, how quickly, how ruthlessly the humans had done it. Commander, we're receiving a distress call, an officer announced. Transport ship is surrounded. They won't make it. His jaw tightened. How many people on board? 300 colonists, mostly children. Send them our course to the evacuation point, ordered. We'll clear a path. Commander, our shields are at 40%. We can't. I didn't ask for a status report. I gave you an order. The Indomitable changed course, moving to intercept the surrounded transport. Hun gripped his chair as they plunged into the thickest concentration of ships. Minu, I want constant fire. Everything we have, commanded. Engineering, divert all power from life support if you need to. We only need to breathe for the next 10 minutes. They dove into the swarm like a predator among prey. Human ships fought with a ferocity Hun had never witnessed. When they ran out of ammunition, they rammed. When their weapons overheated, they used their ships as shields. When death was certain, they made sure to take as many with them as possible. The transport broke free and headed for safety, but it cost them. 5 human ships were destroyed in the maneuver, 5 crews dead. Transport is clear, the communications officer reported quietly. Nodded once, marked their names, all of them, their heroes. That was when Hun understood something fundamental about humans. They weren't fighting a battle. They weren't executing a military strategy. They were paying a price, willingly, to save their people. And they calculated that price in blood without hesitation. The battle continued. Hour after hour the humans pushed forward. They lost ships, they lost people, but they didn't stop. Dr. Borahan joined them on the bridge during the 6th hour. She was a small woman, wearing a lab coat stained with blood samples. She looked exhausted. Commander, I have something new, she announced. They communicate through pheromones. I've created a chemical compound that mimics their retreat signal, if we deploy it. Will it work? Asked. In theory, yes, but I haven't had time to test. Deploy it now. Within minutes, the forces began to pull back. Not because they were defeated, they still had superior numbers, but because their own biology was screaming at them to flee. Dr. Han had literally hacked their instincts. Hun watched the retreat in confusion and horror. They were running from a force 1/10 their size, running from humans who should have been easy prey. Begin ground operations. His voice came over the ship-wide communication. Every colonist, every single one, we leave no one behind. The next 6 hours were a blur. Human ground forces descended on 4. They fought through tunnels, clearing them room by room. They carried out wounded colonists on their backs. They held impossible positions until evacuation was complete. Hun watched it all from the bridge, unable to look away. He saw a young human soldier named carry 4 children to safety before going back for more. He saw medics working in the open under fire. He saw engineers rigging buildings to explode, buying time for others to escape. He saw humans die, knowing they would die and doing it anyway. When the last transport lifted off with the last colonist, the numbers came in. Of the 50,000 colonists, 48,200 were saved. 1,800 had died before the humans arrived. The human military losses were severe. 12 ships destroyed, 2,300 soldiers and crew dead. But the losses were catastrophic. Their entire invasion force, 40 million ground troops, 18,000 bioships, was annihilated, not defeated, not driven back, annihilated. For the first time in recorded history, the swarm had been completely destroyed on a world they'd claimed. As the human fleet regrouped, Hun found himself on the observation deck, staring at the planet below. 4 was but alive. Humans had saved it. Found him there. She looked exhausted, her uniform torn and bloody. Counselor, she said quietly, you got your historical record. I don't understand, Hun admitted. How did you do this? They are unstoppable. Every species knows this. Gazed at the planet. Every species accepted it. We didn't. But the cost was acceptable, she finished. 2,300 of ours died to save 48,000. That math works. Your people fought like they were already dead, Hun said. No, corrected. They fought like the people they were saving were already alive. There's a difference. She walked away, leaving Hun alone with his thoughts. Everything he believed about humanity was wrong. They weren't lucky primitives playing at civilization. They were something far more terrifying. They were survivors who refused to accept the word impossible. And the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The galactic humanity, 1 week after the Battle of Four. The chamber was filled to capacity. Every species wanted to be present for this moment. Hun sat in his designated seat, but he felt like a stranger in a place he'd known for decades. His perspective had shifted. The grand chamber that once impressed him now seemed empty and hollow. High Chancellor and stood at the center podium. The Council has reviewed the events at Four. While we acknowledge humanity's success in defending their colony, we must address serious concerns about the methods employed. Ambassador stood at the human platform. She looked different than before, older perhaps, or just tired. The Council is concerned, she asked, her voice neutral. Yes, and continued. Humanity deployed biological weapons, used kinetic bombardment, and engaged in what can only be described as excessive force. These actions violate several Council regulations regarding warfare. Regulations we never agreed to follow, pointed out calmly. As a provisional member, you are expected to respect Council standards. Council standards, repeated. She pulled up a holographic display. These are the communication records from the 3 days you debated while our people were being eaten alive. Would you like me to read them aloud? The chamber fell silent. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. That was a difficult decision, and said carefully, but it does not justify. We followed your rules, interrupted, her voice rising. We waited, we asked for help, we begged, and you voted to let 50,000 humans die because it was acceptable losses. So we stopped following your rules, and we saved them. At what cost? Another council member challenged. You committed acts that would be considered war crimes by galactic law. War crimes, said softly. She looked around the chamber. Tell me, council members, how many of your species have faced how many worlds have you lost to them? Hands raised across the chamber. Nearly every species had lost something to And how many times have you fought back, really fought back, pressed? Not evacuated, not retreated, fought. Silence. We fought, continued, with everything we had, with weapons you call cruel, with tactics you call excessive, and we won. For the first time in recorded history, they were completely destroyed on a world they'd claimed, and you want to punish us for it. The debate raged for hours. Hun listened, but his mind was elsewhere. He had spent the past week researching human history, really researching it, not just skimming reports. What he found horrified him. Humans had been at war with themselves for their entire existence, not occasional conflicts, constant war. They had invented weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. They had burned entire cities. They had split the atom and used it as a weapon. They had created diseases, poisons, and countless ways to kill each other. And then somehow they had stopped. They had built a peaceful society. They had reached the stars. They had tried to be diplomatic. But the capacity for violence hadn't disappeared. It had only been sleeping. Hun had mistaken their peace for weakness. He understood now. Human peace wasn't the absence of violence. It was the choice not to use it. When that choice was taken away, when they were pushed too far. The vote came that evening. The Council decided to place sanctions on humanity, restricted trade, limited travel, penalties for their excessive military actions. Admiral stood up when the vote was announced. Hun had seen her in the reports from Four. She had commanded the defense fleet, making the hard decisions, paying the blood price for victory. She was not as diplomatic as. The Council imposes sanctions on humanity for saving our own people. she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Let me make sure I understand. You refused to help us. You left us to die. We survived anyway, and now you punish us for it." "Admiral, please understand," and began. "No, you understand," cut him off. "We asked for your help and you debated. We asked for your support and you calculated acceptable losses. We asked to be equals and you treated us like children. We're done asking." "Admiral, I must warn you against." "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council," announced. "Effective immediately. We will honor existing trade agreements with individual species, but we are done with this institution. We tried peace. We tried diplomacy. We tried following your rules, and when we needed you most, you abandoned us." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. A species had never voluntarily withdrawn from the council before. "You can't do this," and protested. "The council is essential for galactic stability." "The council is essential for council members," corrected. "We are no longer members. We will defend our worlds, protect our people, and handle our own affairs. If other species wish to trade with us or form alliances, they know where to find us." She walked out, and the entire human delegation followed. In the chaos that followed, Hun made a decision. He requested a leave of absence from his duties and booked passage to Earth. He needed to understand these humans, really understand them. Earth was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, but it was the surface that truly shocked him. Everywhere he looked, he saw monuments to war, museums dedicated to battles, memorials to the dead, cemeteries that stretched for miles. Every human city had them. Every culture remembered their conflicts. His guide was Ambassador Nam, a human diplomat who had studied culture. She seemed amused by his shock. "You thought we had forgotten," she observed as they walked through a military cemetery. Rows of white stones stretched endlessly. "I thought you had moved past this," Hun admitted. "Your generation has known peace." "We have," agreed. "But we remember the cost. Every human child learns about the Great Wars, the World Wars, the nuclear age, the centuries of conflict. We don't hide from our history, we carry it with us." She knelt by one of the stones. "This is my great-great-grandfather. He died in the Pacific War fighting against tyranny. I never met him, but I know his story. Every family has stories like this." "But why remember?" Hun asked. "Why not let the past stay buried?" "Because forgetting would dishonor the dead," said simply. "And because remembering keeps us from making the same mistakes. We know what war costs. We know the price of violence. That's why we choose peace when we can." "And when you can't?" She stood up, meeting his eyes. "Then we pay the price again and again, and we make sure it's worth it." Over the following weeks, Hun traveled across Earth. He visited schools where children learned about historical battles. He saw training facilities where soldiers prepared for conflicts they hoped would never come. He attended a memorial service for the soldiers who died at war, watching families grieve for their heroes. And slowly, terrifyingly, he began to understand. Humans didn't have a warrior culture alongside their civilization. Their entire civilization was built on the foundation of their warrior heritage. Every scientific advancement had military applications. Every cultural achievement existed because someone had fought to protect it. Every moment of peace was maintained by the threat of violence. They didn't compartmentalize warfare in daily life. They integrated it, accepted it, made it part of their identity. Meanwhile, the galaxy was learning what humanity's withdrawal meant. 6 more attacks occurred across Council space in the following months. Each time, the Council debated. Each time, they decided to evacuate and abandon the worlds. And each time, human ships appeared anyway. They had no authority, no council approval, no official standing, but they came and they fought and they won. Species that had lost hope began to hope again. Worlds that faced certain death were saved. Some council members protested, But their own people were asking a dangerous question. Why can the humans save us when the Council won't? Hun received reports of secret negotiations, species making private defense agreements with humanity, trade deals that bypassed Council oversight, a new power structure forming outside official channels. He realized with a sinking feeling that the galaxy was changing. The old order was cracking, and humans, these young, emotional, violent humans, were at the center of it all. His final night on Earth took him to the coast. They stood on a cliff, watching the sun set over the ocean. "You came here to understand us," she said. "Did you find your answers?" "Yes," Hun replied, "and it terrifies me." "Good," said. "You should be afraid, not of us, but of what happens when anyone pushes us too far." "You were trying to warn us," Hun realized. "When you spoke about your violent history, when you showed restraint and diplomacy, you weren't being weak. You were giving us a chance." "We always give peace a chance first," confirmed. "Because we know exactly what war costs. But, Counselor, you need to understand something. We tried your way. We followed your rules. We asked for your help. And you let our people die while you debated." She turned to face him fully. "Humanity will never forget that. Never. And we'll never let it happen again." Hun returned to the Council station, a changed being. His journal from that period contained a single entry. "I was wrong about everything." The full-scale invasion began 6 months after humanity from the Council. It was coordinated and massive, 40 worlds under simultaneous attack. The Council fleet mobilized, but it was clear within days that they were losing. They had learned from their defeat at 4. They brought overwhelming numbers. They adapted to the Council's tactics. They pushed forward relentlessly. World after world fell. Billions died. The Council military, which had maintained galactic peace collapsed under the assault. High Chancellor called an emergency session. The chamber was half empty now. Many representatives had fled to defend their home worlds. Those who remained looked desperate. "We must request assistance from humanity," and announced, his voice heavy. The objections were immediate. "They left the Council," one member shouted. "They rejected our authority." "They're our only hope," replied quietly. "Our fleets are broken. Our worlds are dying. Pride means nothing to the dead." The vote passed, barely. Hun volunteered to lead the delegation to Earth. He was the logical choice. He had spent time there, knew their culture, understood their language. But really, he volunteered because he felt he owed them this. He had been wrong about humanity. This was his chance to make it right. The delegation arrived at Earth 3 days later. They were brought to a military facility where they waited nervously. Finally, they were led to a conference room. General sat at the head of the table. He had been promoted after 4, now commanding all of humanity's defense forces. Ambassador sat beside him, along with Admiral and several other human military leaders. Hun stood before them, and for the first time in his life he bowed. Not the polite diplomatic bow he'd seen use, but a full, deep bow of genuine respect. "General, the Galactic Council requests humanity's assistance," Hun said formally. 40 worlds are under assault. Our fleets are failing. Billions of lives hang in the balance. "You're asking us to save you," said simply. It wasn't a question. "Yes. After you refused to save us, after you sanctioned us, after you called our methods excessive and cruel." His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Yes," Hun repeated. "We were wrong about everything and were desperate." Silence filled the room. Hun could feel his delegation's fear. If humanity refused, the Council was doomed. Stood up and walked to a window overlooking the military base. Young soldiers were training below, running through combat drills. "Every one of those soldiers knows someone who died at 4, said. "Every one of them remembers how the Council abandoned us. They want revenge, Counselor. They want to watch the Council burn." Hun felt cold fear grip him, but continued, turning back. Revenge would make us just like you, calculating losses, deciding who deserves to live. We're better than that." He walked back to the table. "Here are our conditions. No more restrictions on human military, no more provisional status, full membership in the council with equal voting rights, and no more sanctions or penalties for how we fight." "Done," Hun said immediately. "I wasn't finished," said. "We also want full access to council technology databases, and the right to form independent alliances without council approval." That's one of Hun's delegates began to protest. "Non-negotiable," interrupted. "You come here desperate, asking us to die for you. Again, these are our terms." The delegation conferred in hushed voices. They were giving up everything: council authority, control over humanity, centuries of established hierarchy. But what choice did they have? "Agreed," Hun said. "All conditions accepted." Nodded once. "Then we fight. Commander, begin fleet mobilization, maximum deployment, every ship, every soldier." Within hours, humanity's full military might was revealed. They had been building, expanding, preparing. The 50 ships the Council had known about were just the beginning. Humanity deployed 300 warships, each one incorporating lessons learned from 4. Hun requested permission to embed with Commander's fleet again. He needed to see this, to witness, to understand. The human armada jumped into the first battle zone, a world called home to 6 billion Council citizens. They had already consumed half the planet. "Same tactics as 4, Hun asked on the flagship's bridge. "No," she replied. "We've learned, we've adapted. They adapted to Council tactics. Now they'll learn what it means to fight an enemy that adapts faster." The battle was unlike anything Hun had seen before. The humans didn't just fight, they experimented. They tried new weapons, new strategies, new approaches. When something worked, they shared it instantly across the entire fleet. When something failed, they adjusted immediately. Dr. Borahan had been busy in the months since 4. She had developed 7 new anti-bioweapons, each one more effective than the last. She deployed them systematically, studying the results, refining her approach. "You're not just killing them," Hun observed. "You're learning from them." "Of course," Bora replied, not looking up from her screens. "Every battle teaches us something. Every we study gives us more data. They're not invincible, they're just biology, and biology can be hacked." Within 12 hours was liberated. The retreated, leaving their dead behind. Human casualties were surprisingly light. They had learned to fight smarter, not just harder. But they didn't stop there. "Ma'am, they are retreating to deep space," a sensor officer reported. "Track them," ordered. "I want to know where they're going." "Commander," Hun questioned, "shouldn't we move to the next threatened world?" "Other human fleets are handling those," replied. "My fleet has a different mission. We're going to end this, permanently." Over the next weeks, the pattern became clear. Human fleets weren't just defending worlds, they were hunting. Every time they retreated, humans followed. Every time they regrouped, humans attacked. No rest, no mercy, no escape. Dr. Bora made a breakthrough on day 17. "I found it," she announced excitedly. "The communication network. It's psionic, but it uses a specific neural frequency. If we can disrupt it." "Do it," ordered. The humans deployed psionic jammers, technology they had developed by studying Council databases and pushing the research further. When the jammers activated, the swarm's coordination collapsed. They began attacking each other, confused and panicked. "They're broadcasting their hive world location," a sensor officer called out. "They're calling for reinforcements." Finally, his voice came through the communication channel. He was commanding the main human fleet. "All ships, we have the coordinates to the home worlds. Prepare for deep space assault." "Wait," Hun protested. "You can't be serious. The home territory is uncharted. No species has ever." "No Council species has ever tried," corrected. She had joined them on the flagship. You all accepted that they were unstoppable. You learned to live with them. We don't live with threats. We eliminate them. The human armada jumped into space. What they found shocked even the humans. 12 worlds, each one a massive hive. Trillions of the true heart of the swarm. We can't fight this many, Hun whispered, looking at the sensor readings. It's suicide. We're not fighting them, explained. We're exterminating them. There's a difference, Dr. Han. Bora's face appeared on screen. She looked tired but determined. I've engineered a virus that targets the queen caste. Once a queen is infected, she'll spread it to her entire hive before dying. Estimated timeline, 6 days for complete colony collapse. A plague, Hun said, horrified. You're releasing a plague that will kill trillions. Yes, confirmed. They've consumed hundreds of worlds, killed billions of council citizens. They attacked our colony, tried to eat our people. Now they pay the price. But complete extinction is necessary, finished. We studied them for months. They can't be reasoned with, can't be contained, can't coexist. They're an existential threat, so we end the threat. The virus was deployed. Human ships maintained a perimeter, destroying any vessels that tried to escape. For 6 days, they watched the civilization die. Hun spent those 6 days in quiet horror. This was genocide. Complete, methodical, calculated genocide, and the humans executed it without hesitation. On the 7th day, the last hive fell silent. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was gone. The human fleet returned to Council space as heroes. Worlds celebrated. Species that had lived in fear for generations felt hope for the first time. Humanity had done the impossible. But Hun couldn't celebrate. He found, and in a quiet observation deck after the victory ceremonies ended. You destroyed them, he said. Completely. I understand why, but you eliminated an entire species. Yes, replied softly. She looked exhausted, older. We did. How do you live with that? And exchanged a look. When spoke, his voice was heavy. Every human who fought in this war will carry it for the rest of their lives. We don't celebrate genocide, counselor. We grieve it, but we don't regret it. They gave us no choice, added. Just like the council gave us no choice at 4. When you corner us, when you threaten our people, when you force us to choose between our values and our survival, we choose survival. Every time. But at what cost to your souls? Hun asked. Everything, admitted. She looked out at the stars. It costs us everything. That's why we tried peace first. That's why we asked for help. That's why we followed your rules as long as we could, because we know exactly what war costs. She turned to face him. You mistook our diplomacy for weakness, our patience for inability, our restraint for lack of capability. You were wrong, counselor. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our rage, it's that we can control it. We can choose peace even though we know how to wage war, but when we're forced to unleash that rage. Everything shatters, Hun finished quietly. Yes, confirmed, everything. Months later, Hun published his completed journal. He titled it When Humanity's Rage Awoke, and it became required reading throughout the council. His final entry read, I have spent my life studying species, understanding cultures, documenting civilizations. I believed I understood humanity. I was wrong about everything. Humans are not warriors who learned diplomacy. They are diplomats who never forgot how to be warriors. Their civilization is not built on peace. It is built on the choice to pursue peace despite an endless capacity for violence. We saw their patience and called it weakness. We saw their restraint and called it inability. We saw their requests for help and called them primitive. We were fools. Humanity doesn't have a warrior culture. Humanity is warrior culture wrapped in layers of art, science, philosophy, and hope. They build beautiful things. They love deeply. They laugh and sing and dream. But underneath it all, beneath the civilization they've constructed, lies something ancient and terrible. When threatened, when cornered, when their people are in danger, that ancient thing awakens, and when it does, the galaxy trembles. They learned this too late. They are extinct now, erased from existence by a species they thought was prey. The Council learned it just in time. We are alive because humanity chose mercy over revenge. But we will never forget the cost of that mercy. We will never again mistake their kindness for weakness. Humanity saved us, and in doing so taught us a lesson we should never have needed. Never, ever push humans to the point where they must choose between their values and their survival. Because when that choice comes, they will always choose survival. And God's help whoever made them make that choice.